unofficial. I gather now it's been officially adopted by whoever runs Star Wars franchise. This is now officially Star Wars Day today. It's almost 50 years, would you believe that? Since Star Wars, 48 years since it came out. If you're younger than 48, you won't think of that in that way. It's always been there, hasn't it, in your life? But those of us who are over 48 remember that time when it came out, and it revolutionised, of course, our whole approach to science fiction. And there we have the introduction on the screen when you watch the film Star Wars. In a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away. And yet, despite the fact that it was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, Star Wars captured the imagination, I imagine, of the whole world. Everyone who watched it seemed to go around the whole world, and everyone was saying, "May the Fourth be with you," or whatever else it was. All the various who's in their time. I don't know. How many of you were what's his name? Some of the characters from that Star Wars. Han Solo, for instance. Darth Vader, Luke Skywalker,
Yoda,
Chewbacca. Yoda. Who's Yoda? Who's playing Yoda here? I know someone does a very good Yoda impression. It's my son. Now, Esther is similar because Esther happened a long time ago in a world far, far away from our own world today. Now, when people watch Star Wars, they use their imaginations and they were able to sort of, if you like, understand and to enter into that world of Star Wars, even though it was fictional. We're talking about a factual world, the ancient world certainly. But I want you to do the same with Esther over the next few weeks. Use your imagination, like you would have done with Star Wars, to put yourselves in the feet or the shoes, if you like, of those people who were living at that time and whose story we're going to read about in the Bible. It's not science fiction. It is the real past that we are looking at. Can we go to the next slide? So, let's just see where we are in time. Here is a brief Bible timeline. The Bible starts with Genesis and creation. The fall, the floods, the promise to Abraham, still in Genesis. And then, of course, God brought the Israelites out of Egypt in Exodus into the land of Canaan. By about 1250 or so, they conquered the land of Canaan, or were conquering it under Joshua, the book of the Judges. Then David comes along and becomes king of Israel, and a great king of Israel, conquers many neighbouring people. That's in 1 and 2 Samuel, and 1 and 2 Kings, as well as evidence elsewhere. And then, after many hundreds of years of David's descendants, the kings following him, being disobedient and the people worshipping other gods, God put an end to that kingdom in 587 BC, the fall of Jerusalem. And the people were taken into exile. And that's in Jeremiah and in Daniel. And then after, over there it's how many years? 61, 50 odd years. God overthrew Nebuchadnezzar and the Babylonians. The Persians overthrew them, conquered them, and the people of Israel were allowed to go back to their lands and to rebuild their temple. Not as an independent kingdom anymore. They were a part of a province of the great empire of Persia still. And therefore that's what we read about in the books of Ezra, Nehemiah, but also Esther. So the book we're looking at, therefore, comes at the very end of the Old Testament in terms of chronology. It's almost one of the last books to be written before the New Testament, before Christ appears. If we're looking at the book of Daniel in our home groups, we've seen that happen, haven't we? Daniel served under the Babylonians, and then also he served under the Persians as well, Cyrus or Darius. Can we go to the next slide, please? The Persian Empire was, in terms of extent, the greatest empire the world had ever seen up to that point. Here is where our story, Esther, is set in Susa, the capital there, or one of the capitals of the Persian Empire, but extended all the way here. If you look at the, don't go to the next slide just yet, actually, it's down here to Egypt. And actually, if you've watched some of the films over the last few years that have come out, there's been at least 2 films about the Battle of Thermopylae, where the great King Xerxes, who's featured here in Esther, tried to conquer Greece. Have you anyone seen the film The 300 Spartans? Or a more recent one with Gerard Butler, just called 300? I'm sure some of you have seen that. But it's a famous battle over here when this great empire of the time Xerxes tried to conquer the Greeks and just failed to. So it's a point where biblical history meets ancient history as recorded in other secular records as well. Just to give you some idea of the size of this empire, go to the next slide. These are all the countries today that are covered in that empire. So even here as far east as India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, various other stands up here, I don't know all their names. Here's Iran, Kuwait, down here we've got Jordan, Israel there, Egypt, Libya, Sudan, up here parts of, in fact the Crimea, where there's fighting today in Russia and Ukraine. That was actually under Persian rule at this time. It was a huge empire, as you can see from that picture, that dwarfs even the powers of today. Without any doubt, Persia was the preeminent empire of the known world at that time, and indeed any time before then as well. But a very different world from the world of the rest of the Old Testament, as well as the world we live in today. We're going to find that the people of Israel are no longer called Israelites in Esther, or Hebrews. They're now called Jews, because they're descended from Judah, one of the tribes of Israel, and that, of course, is the name that's remained with them right up to today. Some of those Jews had gone back to Palestine, to the land of Israel, when they'd been released by the Persians, but others had remained in the empire. They were now a small minority in a great sprawling pagan empire. There was no kingdom of Israel. There is no king of Israel. There's no 10 commandments written into the law of the land anymore. They are the people of God in a secular, pagan world. Actually, very much like us today, in so many ways. In fact, in some ways, Esther is a little bit like a transition from Old Testament Israel to New Testament Israel, which is us. We too live scattered all over the world, don't we? In the empire that sometimes the New Testament calls it Babylon, but it's the empire of the world, the way the world thinks, the way the world behaves. We live in that empire today as a small minority, like Esther in her time. One of the most remarkable things about the book of Esther is that God is never mentioned in the whole book. There are 10 chapters of Esther, and never once is God mentioned, nor is Scripture mentioned or quoted at all. The word prayer is never used either. There is fasting, but they never mention prayer at all. There's one mention to Jerusalem, which is like a throwaway, an aside almost, but apart from that, Jerusalem isn't mentioned. There's no mention of the temple either, or of the priesthood. It's like religion has been stripped out of the book of Esther. And yet, the silence is deafening. God is like the elephant in the room. He isn't mentioned, no one talks about him, and yet he is so obviously there, as we'll see as we go through the text. The writer of Esther, whoever he or she was, is very subtle in what he's written down there. So listen, pay attention to the words, read them carefully yourself perhaps before you come on a Sunday, or maybe afterwards as well, and detect the unseen hand of God in the book of Esther. A bit like in Star Wars. What determines the outcome in Star Wars is the Force, isn't it? Has anyone ever seen the Force? It's absent, isn't it, the whole time? It's referred to in Star Wars, but we never see it, do we? Or we never know quite what the Force is exactly. Just saying, the Force, may the Force be with you. With you. I'm getting problems here, aren't I? Pronouncing the Force. The Fourth, may the Fourth be with you. But the Force is there, but we don't see it at all. A bit like in Esther, God is present, but he's unseen. He's the unseen power behind the throne. There's also, in the subtlety of the writing, there's a great deal of irony and even satire. You see, the author is often quietly mocking the great empire of Xerxes that thinks it controls most of the known world. And yet all the time the author knows, and we know, there is an unseen hand behind that actually is controlling events. Have you had time to read the introduction in the bulletin yet to the book of Esther? Do take that for a moment if you can and glance through it. If you have read it, you'll recognise that it's, again, I'm trying to mimic the author of Esther here because there is some irony there, because as you read that, who might it be referring to? Sorry? Trump, yes, President Trump. I mean, we have here a man who is the most powerful man in the world, ambitious to become greater still by absorbing a neighbouring territory whose name begins with Greenland, obviously, yes. This country is ruled over by an autocrat who is not that intelligent, but who is full of self-importance and vanity, who pursues power and pleasure in equal measure, and who is known for his sensual self-indulgence, particularly with regards to wine and women, prone to fits of temper, liable to hire and fire staff at a moment's notice, and his decision-making is often bizarre, to say the least. Well, who are you thinking of? But actually, if you wrote that all these years ago at this time, you'd say, that's Xerxes. That has to be Xerxes. And it equally well applies to him. And that's another point I wanted to make to you. Actually, it is as relevant today, this book, as it was back in the time of Xerxes. We can apply it to present-day people and present-day events, just as it can be applied also in those days to the great kingdom of Xerxes, ruling over the Persian Empire then. So, may the Spirit be with you and be with us as we study it together and discern God's purposes for us in our age. Amen.